What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another video today, and in this video I'm going to be reflecting back on the Airliners Expedition. This will likely be a very long video, so feel free to kick back, relax, maybe grab some popcorn here for a couple minutes or so. Just do whatever you need to do to get yourself comfortable, because this will definitely be one of those videos where I'll be talking for probably about 30 minutes, I estimate, if not longer, because a lot of it will be just recapping the whole trip and then reflecting on just the whole experience from start to finish, because there's so much to talk about that obviously the videos do a really good job of explaining, but I always like to do these summaries in verbal form, since that's just kind of a tradition that I've had now for the last several trips that I've done, with the Dallas Airliners International show, Kansas City Airliners, and then the Florida trip, and now this, because this one was the best Airliners International yet, and we'll certainly get to that here in just a moment. Sorry about that, my computer wants to yell at me, but I guess it might serve as a reminder to grab some popcorn. But anyway, let's go ahead and get started with the recap. So the trip officially begins on the Friday before Airliners. So yeah, this trip lasted just over a week. Longest I've ever been away from home in terms of just a vacation, not, college or visiting family, that type of stuff. That's usually different in my books. But in terms of just a vacation, this was definitely the longest that I had been away from home. And it didn't really start off on the right foot, mainly because Frontier Airlines, my flight to Denver, was delayed several hours because of a late aircraft. So while I was waiting for that, since it was a Friday night, the NASCAR Truck Series was on. So I was able to watch the race at home, and I think I left while it was still going, but it was right towards the end of it anyway. So by that point, that aircraft, it had gotten to Denver, it was pushing back from the gates, so we made our way to the airport, and that is where the adventure began. So I got through security, which was very easy, no line ahead of me. The agent that I encountered there was actually very friendly, and I didn't have to remove as much stuff off of me. I think I still had to take off my shoes, because this was still when the policy was you had to take off your shoes. I know that they changed that over the summer, where you don't have to remove your shoes anymore going through TSA, which I think is really good. That'll definitely speed things up. But whether or not you'll have to remove like large electronics and all that, that will vary from airport to airport. But they'll still have you remove stuff from your pockets, which is understandable. And I know, at least for me anyway, I remember a couple times where I was wearing shorts that had like little metal ends on them. I don't know what they call them, the things on the front of the shorts that I had. Sometimes that would trip up the security thing, so they'd have to check to make sure, and they're like, oh yeah, okay, you're good to go, just because it was that triggered something within their system. But anyway, so amid the delay, I still waited a while in the airport, but I did get a few minutes to chat with a friend, Miller. I don't know if you guys know him that well. I have featured him in some capacity when I flew to Florida. He did film my departure, so I was really grateful for that. He stopped by where I was at for a few minutes, and we chatted for a while. We had a really good conversation going about FSD and a bunch of other topics. So very productive conversation for sure. And he was definitely eager just to see where I was all going. And he did know about the convention a little bit, but obviously with his very busy schedule, he couldn't make it. But hopefully he'll be able to make it out to the next event, whatever it might be. And I'll certainly talk more about that towards the end of the video a little bit, and we'll probably do a follow-up video at some point if there isn't new information by the time this comes out, so we'll certainly explore that a bit. And that takes us into the Frontier Airlines flight to Denver, A320neo, Wiley the Bison. If I check back at my notes, because fortunately I was smart enough to write down everything, our delay was just over 2 hours behind schedule, which, it could have been worse. And the other thing that helped me out was we didn't have any connections. It was just a overnight layover in Denver. So even if I had arrived at, like, say, midnight or 1 a.m., probably only a few hours of sleep would have worked out, but it's not the end of the world. We can make up sleep at other points in the trip if it came down to that. But as for the flight itself, it was really good. not too much to report on. I just kept myself occupied just by watching some downloaded content I had on my phone. And that was that. That got me to Denver, parked at the A gates, which I understand is a bit of a newer section, but it certainly doesn't feel that way. So I got off the plane, and that's when I met up with Connor and Anderson. Obviously, those two, we traveled together for that entire week. It was certainly amazing, and I'll talk more about my thoughts on that at the end. But just the moment of embracing each other when I got off the plane and just seeing both of them for the first time since we did our last trip in Florida, it only being like 7 months, which it could have been a full year if we didn't do that Florida trip in between all that. Certainly a lot longer than I would have liked to see them again, but hey, it worked out in this regard, and I certainly think the 1 or 2 trips that we do a year is a very good balance. Maybe we'll get to do more in the future, but who knows where we'll all end up being at. It'll certainly be interesting to see what the future holds for all of us. But a nice walk through Denver as we made our way out and then got to our hotel that night. And the next morning comes around, the second day, or the first full day of this trip technically, so it'll be labeled as day 1. Shuttle onward from the hotel to the airport, and that's when I got my very first glimpse of the Rocky Mountains, since I'd never been this far west in my life, so I know I still need to get out all the way to the West Coast, like California, Oregon, Washington, and some of the other western states like Nevada, Montana, Idaho. All those states will certainly be on my bucket list, and hopefully I get some time to explore those in the future. But the overall ride to the airport, was great. We get to the Denver airport, not too much to report on in terms of the security line in like abnormal things, but we did get a few minutes at that spotting terrace on the west side of the B gate, since that's where the lighting was best. We didn't get too many planes as we had to get back to our gate, which was Bravo 32 for the United 777. That would be our ride over to Chicago. So for me and Syracuse Aviation, that was our first wide body, and Connor, it was probably like his 20th or 30th or something. I don't know. He's been on so many wide bodies at this point. But great flight that we had on United. The product on there is really good, even if it might be a little bit dated, but not too much I can really complain about in terms of the cabin and the product itself. But it's just amazing seeing the all of the seats on the 777. It just feels a bit surreal to me seeing so many seats spread out like that on a wide body, because the only other one I'd ever been on was the last year at Airliners in Kansas City when we did the Jet Midwest tour. There was a ex-Japan Airlines 777 that still had the cabin in there, and then there was an Eastern 762 in the hangar that also still had the cabin. And then those are really the only wide bodies I'd ever been on up to that point. So this United 777, the first active one that I've ever been on. And like I said, great experience for all of us. We enjoyed it. And with the 6 or so hours that we had in Chicago, plenty of time to do some plane spotting around the O'Hare airport. So that's what we did after a ride through the airport train. And we ended up getting a rental car there, since we figured it'd be the easiest way to get around. And since we wanted to check out a good number of spots and, of course, get food in some capacity, a rental car was the best decision for all of us. And we had a lot of fun spotting at O'Hare. If I go back through my clips that I have on my computer, I've got like 6 albums of videos and photos on my computer just for this trip. So that if that doesn't tell you how much I filmed, I don't know what will. But it certainly takes up a lot of space on my hard drive with all the clips, especially, my camera, since I film at 4K, it takes up a lot of space. So I need like a really big hard drive to keep all this stuff stored. And long term, it'll certainly be interesting to see how that all unfolds. But for the spotting highlights in O'Hare, we saw stuff like the Austrian 787, which I was expecting that we could get to spot it in Dulles, but I was happy to take this O'Hare spotting since we didn't get much spotting time in Dulles. And then we had the ITA A330-200, the American Eagle Retro 170 came back, Lufthansa 748 new livery, that was also fun. That was just at the Dave & Buster's parking garage. And then we checked out the Schiller Park location, which is that little metro train station that they have. Got a couple 787s down there for American and United. And then we went back to Dave & Buster's for a bit, and we caught some more of the wide bodies. We saw like Qatar, Swiss, a lot Polish, just to name a few. And then towards the end of our time there, we saw the British 777-200, Scandinavian A330, the TAP A330neo, and then the last plane we saw was the Royal Jordanian 787 before we had to get back to O'Hare Airport to not only drop off the rental car, but to get ready for our next flight. Now, before we could do that, we had to get through a security line, which, as I mentioned in the trip report, it took about 30 minutes to get through the security line. They had only like 3 lanes open for just that one terminal, and all the other lanes were closed. So I don't know why they didn't have more lanes open. It was a weekend, so you would think that they would have more agents on duty, but they didn't. So they could only have 3 lanes open. That meant the line moved pretty slowly, and I did have a bit of a concern that we weren't going to make the flight, but Connor assured me that we'll make it. It might be a little close, but we'll make it. And then as we got through security, Connor and I, we got through okay. And then Anderson, they had to stop him because one of his models triggered something within the security system, so they had to rescan it. I think it was the Breeze Embraer 195, if I remember right, that tripped up the system. That was the model that I traded for his Northwest 727, which we ended up unboxing by the time we got to our hotel in Washington, D.C. But thankfully, that few minutes, that didn't put us over the edge to where we had to run through the terminal like what the McAllister family did in Home Alone, is what I referenced in the trip report. Certainly remember watching that scene many times as a kid when we played that movie as a family. And just seeing all the old planes there, because they had an American DC-10 taken off from Chicago, because, yeah, the family was going to Paris, if I remember right, in that movie. And then obviously they had to get back home because they left Kevin behind. But, yeah, I need to rewatch that movie. It's been a long time since I've seen it. I need to refresh myself on what happened in that movie. But eventually we finally get to our plane, the United 757-200, that'll take us over to Washington Dulles International Airport. My first time on a 757 and my second United flight. Flight was really good. We made it to the aircraft as they were calling that last group of boarding, so we still had probably like another 10, 15 minutes, if I had to guess, before they would end up closing the boarding doors. And then as we were boarding, we had the whole debacle with the bags because they had to gate check my carry-on, just like what they did on the 777, because both those flights were full. They were completely booked. So we had to go through that, and several of us congregated in the back of the plane, and we were just standing there because the flight attendants, they had to write the gate tags with just towels that they had in the back of the plane because they didn't have like the sticker printer thing, the thingamajig that prints out the gate tags. But eventually they came back around with those once they got printed. The rest of the flight, very much uneventful until we got to Dulles, where we had to wait 45 minutes because there was a United 777 bound for London that was delayed several hours due to a catering issue. Now, I don't know the specifics as to what happened with that plane, but obviously the catering issue was significant that the flight had to be delayed a couple of hours. And it's a bit of an interesting story with that I didn't tell in the trip report. We had another friend of ours who was flying back from Europe. They just came back from a big trip of their own with their family. And we told them, like, right as we were about to board the 777 that, we're going to be passing through Dulles roughly around the time that you're at the airport connecting to get on your flight back home. And with that delay, unfortunately, that meant we didn't get to meet him at the airport. But the good news is he was one of the many people that went to Airliners, so we only had to wait a few more days before we finally met up there. But, it is what it is. Nothing we could have done. But thankfully, we did get to the gate like 45 minutes late because of that catering issue plane, which they finally got it pushed back. And I remember this, too, on the plane. I kept track of it on Flight Radar, and I had a nice couple that was sitting next to me, and they were going to Lisbon. So we talked for a bit while we were sitting on the taxiway, and, they told me their whole story and all that. They were coming from, I think they were coming out of Wisconsin. They flew from Minneapolis to Chicago, and then they were doing Chicago to Washington, and then Washington to Lisbon. And they ended up getting rebooked on the next flight, thankfully, by United, which was great. But I remember showing them, like, okay, the United plane that was at our gate, that's pushed back now, so we'll be moving here in a few minutes. And that seemed to, I think that did get around the cabin pretty quickly. So that's kind of one of the reasons why I think AvGeeks are very helpful in situations like this, because then they have these tools. We have these tools that we can use to track other planes, and especially in situations like this where there's a delay, we can see, like, is there a plane that's at our gate? Or if we're taking off, are there other planes coming in? Or is there something else happening that maybe we're not really aware of? So that's why I think AvGeeks are kind of helpful in these situations. If you have one on your flight and maybe you're not so much into this realm, then it certainly helps out in that regard. We make it to the hotel. We do that unboxing of that Northwest 727. Awesome little model that I got out of the trade with Anderson. And he got another Breeze 195, so that's his second now in his fleet. I didn't need mine anymore because Breeze retired theirs, and I don't know if Gemini's ever going to make the 190 because I know they're still keeping those for charters. So our stay in Washington was kind of nice, though I will say our hotel room was kind of hot. I don't think I got the best sleep that night, unfortunately. The hotel room that we had in Denver, too, was also kind of hot. I remember that. But thankfully, we made it through the night without much problems. And then that takes us to the next day, spotting at Dulles that morning. And we saw Ethiopian, ANA, Korean Air, some of the morning heavies. We would have stayed for the afternoon, but obviously we had a flight to catch at that time, so our stay was very short. A couple hours, though, not too bad for my first session, but I will certainly return there to get some of the fun afternoon aircraft that fly in. And we also did see an Emirates A380, which we were hoping to see land, but ended up landing on the other side of the airport from where we were facing. But we did get some pictures of it taxiing in, so I have a little clip of that in the Dulles spotting video towards the start. So then it gives us time to check out the head house after we did our spotting, and we ended up baking a little bit because there was a nice breeze in the early part of our stay, but as the morning moved on and the temperature started rising, it really started to get hot, and I was sweating, and the other two were starting to get to that point too. So our stay, we ended up leaving, I think it was around lunchtime, so we got a couple hours in, which again, not too bad, but we'll certainly make it back to Dulles at another day to get a more formal spotting session in, maybe when the weather's a little cooler, but we'll see how it all unfolds. But we did get to go into the head house, which was nice and cold, just the perfect environment. And the head house is just fantastic. I love the way that the roof is sloped up and down like that and everything. Just how there's not really any right angles because it's designed by the same architect that made the TWA Flight Center at JFK, which is now the hotel that they have there. Inside, we saw the Turkish 787 taxiing by us, which I thought was great. And then just some of the other fun stuff that they have in there. Like they had a whole Lego replica of the head house. And eventually, that takes us on to public transportation. So we took the metro train from Dulles to the Baltimore airport. Well, first we actually did from D.C. up to Union Station in D.C. So we did that to catch the MARC train, spelled M-A-R-C if you're not familiar with it. And then that train we took from there to BWI. And that takes us to the second Frontier A320neo for this trip. And it is with Georgia the Painted Bunting. That's where we ran into the very slick flight attendant that had that really good radio voice and did the safety briefings and everything. Really good flight attendant. I didn't see much of him. And as I record this, I still don't know if he has seen the video yet, but hopefully he does because he did excellent. So huge props to him for really putting in that effort to conduct that safety briefing. But the flight itself was really good, enjoying the views of Georgia on the winglet and just seeing everything down below, and even seeing, the Charlotte Motor Speedway, which if you saw that trip report, I freaked out over because obviously I'm a big NASCAR fan, and just I've never seen the track in person. The only track that I've ever seen in person was the Darlington Raceway in South Carolina. After I flew from Minneapolis to Charlotte with family, we drove to Myrtle Beach, and our routing took us through Darlington, and we took the road that goes right past the racetrack. So that was, I think, about a couple weeks before that year's Southern 500, the Labor Day weekend race that they have. So it was starting to get a little busy there, but nothing that was really notable because we passed through when it got dark out. But as for this, the Charlotte Motor Speedway, this was just a little under a month after the Coke 600 that they have their Memorial Weekend. So not much happening there, at least at this time of the year. And they'll have another event again in the fall, which whenever this video comes out, will be much closer to that event than the 600-mile event. But the landing in the Charlotte was really good. We get to ride in Connor's awesome vehicle. Such a nice car that he has. So we went around the airport a little bit, did some spotting that evening, and then it was on to the hotel, which, you know, with Connor's situation in Charlotte at the time, he has the internship, so he's got his own place, so that left Anderson and I at our own free will to do whatever we wanted, and we certainly made the most out of our time. The first full day that we had in Charlotte, that's when Anderson and I did that contour turn up to Parkersburg via Beckley and then back. And let me tell you, that whole day was just very chaotic. It started off with that like 3-hour delay that we had because they swapped our aircraft a couple times. The second aircraft had the pilot air conditioning system break, and there wasn't another available aircraft. So we had to wait a few hours, and we contemplated, like, if the delay had gone any further, we would have just gotten off that. But thankfully, the delay did not go much longer once we learned that there's another aircraft coming in that will likely be the replacement. And thankfully, we got on our way. We did the contour turn without really any other major delays other than on the way back. Beckley and Parkersburg airports were great. Security line, I remember Anderson got stopped, actually, when we were trying to get through. So that added only a couple minutes. But thankfully, we still had plenty of time until we boarded the plane. But then the flights back, they were really good. The flight attendants were amazed that we were coming back, and we were just like, yeah, we're just collecting segments. That's really what we're doing. We're not really here in Parkersburg for the sake of visiting the city, just more so because this is where this whole routing goes. So we took that, and that's actually my first EAS service, Essential Air Service, that I've ever taken, now that I think about it. So that's a check box that I didn't think I'd get to check off, but I certainly did there. But maybe I'll have to do something like Denver to like Devil's Lake or Jamestown or something in North Dakota, or Pierre or Watertown, those two cities as well. They have essential air service programs in effect up there as well. But who knows? Maybe that will happen at some point. And then the kind of the funny part of this trip was the kid vaping in the lavatory on when we were in the ground in Beckley, just about to start that final leg back to Charlotte. Kid goes in the back, I hear a beeping, and I'm like, what the heck is that beeping noise? And the flight attendant runs to the back and is telling whoever's in the lavatory, like, hey, if you're smoking, I suggest that you stop doing that. And the kid comes out, he's got this look of like, I swear I didn't do anything. I swear I didn't do anything, which is just a blatant red flag of like, yeah, I did something. So the kid had to go up to the front of the aircraft to talk with the pilot. Surprisingly, they let him off with a warning. I thought they were going to throw him off the plane there in Beckley, but I'm guessing the crew on that flight, they were just wanting to get off the ground in Beckley and go to Charlotte without having to deal with any paperwork and all that. So they just said, all right, kid, that's your warning. You can stay on the plane, but if you do it again, you're in big doo-doo. So kid sat behind me on that flight, I remember, and he was probably like twiddling his thumbs, thinking like, what am I going to get in trouble with? Like, what am I going to have to do? But I didn't hear anything else, so I'm guessing they just let it go. It's whatever. So, but let that be a good lesson. Never smoke on a plane, and just don't smoke at all, because that stuff's bad for you. But that's a topic for another time, but I think you get my point. So anyway, that contour turn was excellent, and for me personally, the chaos with the delays and all the other things that happened just really made it more memorable. So that's what really made this stand out for us, and we're really glad we did that contour turn. That was such an amazing experience. So we get back to Charlotte, do a little bit of brief spotting, and we get some pizza to conclude the night. Back to the overlook the next morning, we do a little bit of spotting, but the temperature is going to soar to like the heat index, I think, got over 100 that day, I remember. So we went to the Sullenberger Museum, just Anderson and I, and we spent much of the afternoon there just exploring the museum, checking out the cool artifacts, and of course the Miracle on the Hudson Plain, the main attraction of that museum. Certainly a great place to visit. And they have a nice little presentation that they play like every 15 minutes that goes through the whole sequence from when the plane taking off until it ditches into the Hudson, and then getting everyone off the plane, and just some of the stories of the passengers that were on that plane, which I think is really cool. And just all the exhibits they have of the various artifacts that the passengers had, like there were old cell phones, computers, briefcases, uniforms, books, just about anything you can think of that your average person would bring on a plane. There's a copy of that in there, of what the passengers had on that plane. So I thought that was really fascinating to check out. And then just the other stuff that they had there, like the outside exhibits with the Eastern DC-7. They had a KC-97 cockpit there, I remember, and a couple military helicopters on one side as well that we walked by. Just a lot of fun stuff there. So that takes us to the main part of this trip, and I know I'm already about 26 minutes into this, but that just shows you how memorable the whole first part of this trip was. But it finally takes us to Airliners International 2025 in Atlanta. Such an amazing time, and I'll talk more about the reflection on that at the end. But we drive to Atlanta, from Charlotte. Connor does the video of us all in the car. We're talking about what we're looking forward to in Atlanta. That was a really good project that we had. We had something a little more elaborate planned out, but it just didn't work with the schedule and everything. So that's kind of the improvisation that we came up with, was to do that before our departure for Charlotte. And the car ride goes really well. We have a lot of fun just talking, socializing, listening to music, things you do on a 4-hour road trip. And it flew by. Like, before we knew it, we were already in the Atlanta metro. The interstate was getting wider with more lanes, and then we passed through downtown, got a really good view of the skyline there, and that was that, really. So car ride went well. We picked up Mark from the airport, the Gemini Jets 1975 gentleman, and we went to town with the whole convention. So started off with that first day, technically day 0 of the convention, and we do a little bit of spotting from the Renaissance Hotel, and that takes us to the ramp tour that Mark Anderson and I had. Connor got selected for the Delta pilot training, I think it was, if I remember right. So he did that tour, but the fact that we all got selected for a lottery tour was impressive, and for 3 of the 4 of the group to get selected for one was really impressive. That's just a stroke of luck that I wasn't expecting to get. So the ramp tour was incredible. We got a really good overview of ATL's operations and got some plane spotting in, the awesome clips that I got, like the Air France 777 that landed right in front of us, Delta 75s, a couple of those. There's a go-around even that I got on camera, just barely. The One World Qatar A350-1000 that was just sitting on the ramp. A lot of fun spotting there on the ramp, and all the other aircraft taxiing by us as we went by the passenger terminals, all the different concourses and stuff. That takes us into the Wednesday night spotting meetup that we had on top of the south parking deck. The weather was great. We had a little shower come through, and that didn't really hinder the operations of our spotting meetup. We had a lot of fun, just all the different aircraft types for Delta, and then some of the internationals coming in. And the biggest highlight was Delta 100 Years. Now, that aircraft, where it was coming from, I think it was Seoul, if I remember right, that normally would land on the north side, just based on the routing. So anything that comes from the north typically lands on that north side. But there was debris on the landing runway on that north side, so that meant that they had to close it and inspect the runway for other debris and all that stuff. So they sent everything to the south side, including Delta 100 Years, and it got the taxi right by us, surprised the heck out of all of us there, and we just enjoyed it. So, of course, I had to buy the model of it at Airliners, which I did the next day, the first official day of the convention. Did a little bit of spotting that night then from our balcony, and that takes us into the first day of the actual collectible show. A ride on the Slimmermobile, and then the Atlanta Air Exchange tour that Connor and I did. A lot of fun checking out the different aircraft that they have there, the various exhibits and everything. Very fascinating tour for sure, and hopefully we'll get more Boneyard tours at future conventions. So we get back to the Delta Flight Museum just after the doors open. We were hoping that we would get back before, but we had a couple of slowdowns based on traffic and just going through the whole facilities, which is understandable. But we did make it back right as the convention, like 10 minutes after it opened, so not too bad. And we just started browsing through stuff. And then a little later in the afternoon, that's when Mr. David showed up, the Fly MDM or Matthew Kachuk superfan gentleman that some of you guys may remember. He's so much fun to be around. He's a really valuable asset for our group. And he was blown away by the whole deal with Airliners. And we tried getting him to go for the Dallas and the Kansas City shows, but it just didn't work out. So we were really happy that it worked out for this show in Atlanta, since he could just drive to it. I think he can get like a 3-hour drive, so not too bad for him. And we just bought a bunch of models. I mean, David destroyed his wallet. He did like 20 models in the first day, so actually probably a little more than that. So he actually one-upped me in terms of my first show when I did that. But thankfully, he's recovered from that financially, I would say, and he will hopefully learn not to do that again at future Airliner shows. But anyway, after that first day, we did get a little bit more spotting in from the hotel, and then we do our annual Slimmerville update. We changed it a little bit due to some logistical complications, but I think what we came up with was a really good idea, since it didn't really hinder too much on the general ebb and flow of these updates, plus we were able to get a larger crew involved, get more planes, and have a lot more fun. And then between the small group that I was in, we did another airport update with some of the JetBlue models that we had acquired. I didn't get any at the show. I should have gotten Blue Unity, but I didn't, so that's on me. Takes us to the next day, Friday morning. Some NASCAR charters surprisingly came in, so I finally got to see those. The Hendrick Motorsports Ember 145 and the Joe Gibbs Racing CRJ 700 came in while we did some spotting before day 2 of the convention. Full day in the ballroom, just browsed around, bought some stuff, and Connor's seminar, of course, that we all attended, and it was a packed plane. It was a full flight for that seminar, which was awesome. I was really happy to see so many people show up for his seminar outside of just our friend group that we have. A lot of people were definitely curious to see what the seminar was about, and for David and I, we got on the mic even, got to use Chris Summer's microphone to sort of promote the seminar, just talk a little bit about Connor and what he means to us, which was really great. And Connor told me later he really appreciated that, which I was very thankful for. And then the rest of the afternoon, more browsing around the ballroom, and then we went to the Delta 747 to check that out. I was going to do a tour based on that, but the clips got a little too chaotic, so I ended up going back out there on the last day to get to just reshoot everything and just have a more laid back tour, if you will. So, but I decided to put a couple clips in the day 2 vlog since I thought they were funny, and just really adds to the just to the fun element of Airliners International and all these conventions. And as the convention draws to a close for day 2, that takes us to what was supposed to be the plane spotting meetup, but obviously if you've seen the video already, that's not what it ended up being. We got like 1 hour of spotting in, and then eventually the storms rolled in. They were off to the north, but they kept back building, and it got to the point where it went right over ATL, and we ended up moving down a level, so we had some shelter. The lightning was great. We got a lot of great lightning shots, and we had the really close one that was like a few hundred feet away from us, but the bolt was loud, like really loud. It scared the bejesus out of everybody there, and the reactions were certainly worthy of a individual video to be uploaded. So, yeah, that whole night was just memorable. Certainly an event that I will never forget, just on the aspect of it being so chaotic. And then the shuttle, we had to wait on that for an hour, which wasn't much of an issue. We didn't really have anything else to do. But thankfully, we got back okay, got some good rest for the last day of the show and the last day of this trip. Excuse me, my voice is really wearing out. That's what happens to talk for 34 minutes straight. But the last day of the show, I didn't film too many clips here. We did do the Delta DC-3 tour on this day, which I kind of forgot about until like last minute, but thankfully we made it in time. It was a very short tour. We just went through the cabin a little bit, listened to a little bit of a lecture on the history of the aircraft, and that's when we went back out to the 7-4 to check it out and got some more formal clips of it for that tour video. And then that takes us into the banquet dinner that night. Most of us went to that, and we had a lot of fun. It was a really good speaker with David H. Stringer on the history of Southern Airways, and then the door prize raffle, which I won. I got a book out of that, and then the Name the Plane contest, which I got third place out of, which I was very impressed by. I was surprised I did that well, but I felt really confident in a lot of the answers, so I feel like, okay, maybe I'll get top 5. If I get like 5th place, I think I'll be proud of myself. But third was even better. So that book was really nice and a really good last item to get out of that show. And that takes me to early Sunday morning. Had to leave before all the other guys were up, except Mark, since he also had to leave early that morning. So we went to the airport, went our separate ways, and I went to the Frontier Gate to board what was supposed to be an A320neo to Denver, but they switched us to a regular A320, Hugh the Manatee specifically, which I'm surprised that one has been made as a model. I thought it did, but no one has done it, so I'll have to see if someone can make that. But anyway, the delay, we had like an hour or so delay. I had 2.5 hours in Denver, so the connection would be a little bit tighter, but still plenty of time to get to where I need to be. The flight itself was great and very uneventful. Connor caught my flight leaving, and then Anderson, of course, witnessed it there too, before they had to go their separate ways, with Connor driving back to Charlotte, and then Anderson flying onward to his next destination. He had some other things to go to, which sounded like he had a lot of fun, so I'm very happy for him. And then for me, at the 1 hour layover in Denver, a little bit of time there at the gate and just to hang out. Thankfully, I got there like right as my plane to Sioux Falls had arrived. It just landed right as I got to the gate. So plenty of time there, so no worry about missing my connection there. Board the plane on the A321, which I am blanking as to what aircraft it is right now, but thankfully I've got my notes. So that one was Cubby the Bear, is the one that I got. November 714, Foxtrot Romeo, A321 back to FSD. That flight itself, very uneventful, same as the first flight, but just a bit shorter. And enjoyable flight. I definitely liked it, just minus the delay. And the 4 flights I had at Frontier were really good. Just sucked that I had delays on all but one of them. Actually, not too bad of a delay on that last one. I think that was probably like a 20-minute delay, if anything. So really, only like 2 bad delays on my 4 Frontier flights. So I eventually land, get home, embrace some time with my parents, since they're really happy to see me come home after being away from home for so long. And then just finally getting home, settling in, and that's when I caught something on this trip. I don't know what the heck I got, but with how many places I went to, I think it was only inevitable I was going to come down with something after going through it all. But thankfully, I've made it through. I'm on the other side, and we're certainly in a good position to just keep moving and grooving. Again, I'm recording this just a little under a month after this trip, but this will obviously go out way after that, just based on my current schedule of all the content for this trip. So that is what we're rocking with. But yeah, that is the full recap. 37 minutes, not counting the intro there. It's like a minute or two. But that's a lot to go over, I know. Just trying to reflect on this, it's hard to put into words to properly describe what this trip was like. Just because of how many fun things we did from start to finish, and the time that I got to spend with Connor and Anderson. Those people are, like I've said so many times, they're amazing people to be around and add so much positivity into my life. And, especially with Connor, his encouragement for me especially to do a trip like this, because a couple years ago, I wouldn't have dreamed of doing something like this. I thought it would have been too much. And admittingly, this was quite a bit for me to endure, but I feel like my endurance has been built up to do trips of this length again, but it'll likely be a while before we do another one like this. So just having Connor with that encouragement to put all this together, get this all put together, and have fun with it all throughout. That's why he's such a positive figure in this community, and why a lot of people look up to him, especially myself, even with being a friend of his for the better part of like 5 years now. And what we've now done in the last like 2 years, with Airliners to doing these trips together and all the collaborations we've done, various projects, especially over on his channel. We've collaborated on numerous videos throughout that time. And I'm certainly proud of how far, that friendship has come, and for all of our friendships to have come, between myself and Anderson, and even for those two between them, they've got a really strong friendship going, and they've traveled together before. They did the Atlanta one-day show in 2023, and then after Connor came back from Europe, they had a few days together before Airliners in Kansas City. And then for the three of us, then we met up again to do the Florida trip, and now the big Airliner show in Atlanta. It is truly amazing. Just looking back on all of this and just thinking, oh my God, I actually did this. I have all of this documented in some capacity that I can put together into videos for other people to enjoy. And that's part of why I do this. I don't do it for the views or the likes or the numbers. I do it so that others can see just how much fun traveling is, and just how much fun aviation as a passion is, because there's so much to it that it's hard to put into words properly, at least something that's in a more consumable format that doesn't take like an hour to explain, because this video is already reaching that point. This would actually probably work as a good seminar. Heck, I mean, it's roughly the length of one now for being at just over 40 minutes at this point. But, it takes a while to explain this stuff. It's not something that I can condense into a 5-minute format, because then I have to omit so many details or reduce a lot of things and just summarize it in one sentence. It just doesn't work like that with stuff like this. You really have to tell the full story to get a better understanding as to just how much fun this trip was, and just how amazing it is to do stuff like this. Because, back many years ago, I would have never thought of doing something like this. When I first started doing YouTube, I never thought to have opportunities like this, to travel with friends, especially those that share the same interest as me, because there's just so much that goes into it. Aviation is a very niche hobby in most regards, so I've never really been able to connect with a lot of people, at least within my town, within my city. So knowing these people that come from all over, it gives me that reassurance that there's a lot of awesome people out there, but you may have to do some digging and just take some effort, and it makes it all worth it in the end. So I'm very proud of myself for doing this, and just being able to embrace all these moments that we had together, and just to reflect back on it it's beyond amazing. It's truly a surreal experience just to look back on it and just think, oh my God, all of this actually happened. This isn't just some dream that I had. Like, I want to do this. Now it's like, I did this. I actually did this. It goes from a want to reality. Dream to reality, better way to put it. But gosh, I don't know what else to really reflect on. It's just so much to take in, but that's really all I've got. That's the Airliners Expedition recap. Just so many ways to describe it, and yet not enough words that I can use that would describe it properly. That's kind of the way to summarize this whole adventure from start to finish. It is amazing. It was amazing, and we'll certainly be doing something like this again, because we strive on these fun memories together, and I can't wait for what's next, because I know that we want to meet back up at some point and do this again, and I certainly think that we'll be doing it. We'll be doing it in some capacity. I don't know what's next, but we'll certainly be pursuing the next opportunities whenever they come up, and all three of us have got a free weekend to do something. We'll certainly take advantage of it. But yeah, this trip was amazing. And that's the last thing I have to say on this trip. With that being said, that is the end of the video. Thanks so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next video.